really want to welcome you to the Ageless Living Wisdom Keeper series. It's an opportunity where we get to talk to and bring to you a variety of leading authors and experts whose life experience and wisdom and inspiration provide you with new life strategies that can help you navigate these complicated times. Today, it's really a pleasure to have our good friend and colleague, Gregg Braden, with us. Those of you who know Gregg's work realize that he's a 5-time New York Times bestselling author. He's a lecturer, he's an educator, he's a researcher, and he's also someone throughout the world who's known for bringing together and melding the worlds of spirituality, science, and human potential. Gregg also happens to be one of the 22 authors that's in the Ageless Living television series. That series right now is airing in a number of cities across the United States. And if it does not happen to be on your local PBS station, if you simply call the station and tell them you've heard the series is really great and you'd love to get to watch it, I'm sure they'll put it on as soon as they can. And you'll be glad that they did, because there's an awful lot of really great stuff in the series. So Gregg and Martha, his wife, also happen to live here in Santa Fe, along with Sadina and myself, and a number of other authors. It's a little enclave of creative talent and energies, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it. But because so many of us travel and have such busy schedules, it's not always easy to get together with other authors here in person. So sometimes we do this digitally. We do interviews with one another and have a chance to catch up and share. And so we're going to make you party to that. Another thing that I'd like you to know is that the reason I consider Gregg such an unusual friend is that he's so generous in supporting Ageless Living and Age Nation in their joint mission, which is to redefine what it means to live consciously and wisely in the 21st century. And Gregg is always generous with his information, willing to help so many people around the world, which is one of the reasons that he's so admired and liked everywhere. So let's get to our interview, shall we?
George, I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's good for me to hear that. It's been a tough couple of days, as you can imagine, here with a global lockdown happening. I do live in Santa Fe with my wife, Martha, and I travel so much, I am not as plugged into my community as I would like to be. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to participate and contribute in whatever way we can to our community. My work it's well known in some circles, and there are a lot of circles where it's not. And we are reaching far beyond the traditional family of new thought, new age philosophy, deep into the mainstream, because people are all looking for answers and want to know what just happened in our world. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to follow your lead today, George. We're going to do a dance, a two-guy dance, and I'm going to follow your lead, and let's see where we go.
And what's also great is that the new technology that has emerged that allows us to see one another face to face and talk and have this kind of a conversation is just wonderful.
Well, absolutely. I just said this in an interview I did in London last night. I said, if you're going to have a global pandemic, the best time to have it is in the technological age, where, we're being asked to become socially distant. But I think it's really important to make the distinction that does not mean social isolation. And the technology that most of us are plugged into right now helps us to honor both of those, to honor the social distancing that appears to be helping for the pandemic that is sweeping the earth right now, yet staying in touch with friends. And because we're not as busy as we used to be, George, people are actually catching up with old friends and making connections that have been long overdue. So yeah, it's good to have it now with the internet.
Yeah, actually, I call it physical distancing because I'm finding that I'm doing what you said. I'm finding myself connecting with people I haven't talked to in a long time, and it's really wonderful, you know. And I think that your distinction about social isolation is also important because it's the one thing that we can't do, and that is lose touch with each other and with humanity as a whole. So, you know, you've been a problem solver for a long time, from, you know, your early career where you were doing it with Fortune 500 companies and with Cisco and others, especially in times of crisis. And then after that, you've been helping a lot of us, both individually and collectively, look at a number of critical problems and challenges through your books and through your work. And in the Ageless Living television series, your program is called The New Human Story, The Power to Thrive in Life's Extremes. So first of all, would you talk to us a little bit about what the New Human Story means for you?
Sure, George. I'm going to back up about a half a step for our viewers that may not be that familiar with me and my work. I am a scientist. I'm a degreed earth scientist, a degreed geologist, but I have a very strong background in life sciences. A lot of people don't know, George, I don't even know if you and I have ever talked about this, but I was a marine biologist before I became a marine geologist that led to terrestrial geology. So I have a very strong background, molecular biology and invertebrate and vertebrate paleontology and things like that. And I say that because it has given me the tools that have served me very well, and especially in recent weeks, to sift through the scientific literature that's often difficult to read. These are very technical papers. They're coming out almost on a weekly basis, George. New discoveries, not only about the coronavirus, but about us, about what it means to be human, are being published, but they're published to very obscure, specialized journals. You're not going to see these in the mainstream. You're not going to see them in what I call the pop science that you see maybe on the nightly news, where someone is trying to break it down for the everyday person, oversimplifying a lot of the discoveries. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about may not be familiar to some people, but it is accepted in peer-reviewed literature, peer-reviewed science. And the reason that becomes important, and now I'm just going to begin, we're having this conversation in the middle of a global pandemic, a national emergency, a statewide lockdown here for New Mexico and some of our neighbors. Colorado, I know, is undergoing the same thing. We've never seen anything like this. And a lot of our community, George, what we're finding, a lot of our community is so unplugged from mainstream that this caught them by surprise. Unplugged, I think, perhaps for good reason. A lot of people, our friends, our community, don't even have televisions any longer. And if they do, they stop watching mainstream news because they couldn't trust it. And I totally get that. I'm totally on board with that. However, if you were going about your life, just living your everyday life, and all of a sudden you weren't plugged in, and all of a sudden you can't go out the way you've gone out, you can't, your restaurants are closed, grocery store shopping is different, that can be a shock. And that shock can be expressed as anger, it can be expressed as frustration, surprise. So in answer to your question, George, I'm going to begin by saying we are living in this extraordinary time. And what I want to say to anyone viewing right now is that you are made precisely for this time. Your body is made precisely, and your body knows exactly what to do for these kinds of experiences. We are literally wired not just to survive, but to thrive and transcend, to adapt to these experiences. Our bodies are so intelligent, and our job is to step aside and allow our bodies to do what they were actually designed to do, and that's part of what the New Human Story is all about. And what that means is supporting all of the life-affirming practices that we know in our everyday lives. And it's, it's nothing new, stuff we all know. Nutrition, diet, movement. Movement is medicine. Some form of exercise every day, sleep. And, in an ideal world, we would like to think we get everything we need, all the nutrition from our food. And the reality is our soils are so depleted that we can have the cleanest vegan diet and we're still not getting what it is that we need, or vegetarian diet or lacto-ovo diet or whatever it is. So supplements are important, and I want to talk about those. So I'm just saying this as a foundation so I can answer your question, George. There is a new human story that is emerging. And the story flies in the face of everything that I learned when I was in school as an earth sciences major, as a geology major. When I was in school back in the 1950s, 60s, early 70s, we were taught Darwin's theory of evolution. And that says that we are the product of a random process, or a series of random mutations where we have become what we are over long periods of time. And the new discoveries, George, and particularly in the science of DNA analysis, we can now work backwards. We can reverse engineer the DNA to see what had to happen to make us who we are today. And the bottom line, this sounds like science fiction. Scientists are able to extract the DNA from the fossilized remains of ancient forms of life, including those believed to be our ancestors. And if you can pull their DNA and build a genome, and then you can compare that to our DNA, and you can tell whether or not they are actually our ancestors and whether we've descended from them. And the bottom line is simply this, George. Evolution is a fact. I've seen it for many forms of life in the fossil record, so I'm not denying evolution. But what I'm saying is the evidence doesn't support evolution as our story. It breaks down when it comes to humans. Something happened. We emerged 200,000 years ago with a series of genetic mutations that are so specialized. And mainstream science are saying these cannot be the product of random processes. They happen quickly in the same period of time, that 200,000 years. And until recent advances of technologies, gene editing technologies like CRISPR is one that I think many of our viewers are probably familiar with. These mutations made no sense, but it's almost as if a CRISPR technology, something like that, was used to create the mutations, the fusions of chromosomes, and the tweaking of the chromosomes after the fusion that makes us who we are today. And it's because of what happened 200,000 years ago. I can say with confidence that we are literally wired to transcend what we're experiencing. Our bodies are designed to be so adaptive and so resilient. And the beauty of what the science is showing us, we showed up 200,000 years ago, George, and for all intents and purposes, we haven't changed. That's not Darwin's idea of evolution. The DNA we have today is the same DNA from what are called anatomically modern humans in our past. So we don't know who or how or what scientifically. I have my own personal opinions, but as a scientist looking at peer-reviewed literature, the science has been so focused on the false assumptions of an obsolete science chasing evolution that they've not allowed the discoveries to lead to the new story that is now emerging very, very quickly. And that story tells us, we could talk a lot about the story, but I want to make it relevant to where we are right now. It tells us that we are made to adapt to precisely what we're experiencing. And we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. We're going to be better individuals. We're going to be better, stronger communities. We're going to have better nations as they're learning to work together. We have a better world. It's a tough route, but I am very optimistic, and my optimism is based on a rock solid science.
So if collectively we recognize this 200,000 year span, we recognize that we didn't evolve as Darwin believed from other species. And as you say, we're wired today to deal with the challenges we face. What are some of the things, in your opinion, we do and can do as individuals to contribute to that new story and to that thriving?
Yeah, that's a good question, George, and we've already answered it to some degree. What we know is for this particular pandemic or for any epidemic that we ever experience, that if we have a reasonably strong immune system, our bodies know what to do with something that they do not recognize. The COVID-19 is the name of the condition. The virus is called SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus that creates the condition that's called, right now it's COVID-19. This convention scientists use. So rubella, for example, is the virus that creates the measles, or HIV was the virus that created the condition that's called AIDS. So this is a convention scientists follow. Our bodies know what to do with this. Our immune systems know what to do with it. Our role in supporting our immune system is all the things that we've talked about: movement, nutrition, exercise. The interesting thing, there are Mother Nature, Pachamama, the planet we live on. Nature gives us supplements and ways to supplement our nutrition through natural products and natural sources that work amazingly well. There are antiviral herbal supplements that are available to us, and some of the most powerful are actually in the mushroom family, George. The virus that we're looking at right now, it is a spherical virus. It is a coronavirus. Viruses have been with us. We get a lot of questions about this. Viruses have been with us forever. Viruses have been with us from the very beginning. We've all heard of the genome. I just mentioned it. The genome within our body. Well, we have so many viruses on a daily basis that are in our body that we also have what is called the human virome, where those viruses are identified. Typically, they're not a problem. So it's not like we never come into contact with viruses. They're part of our world, part of our life. They've been with us forever. They're with us now, even before the COVID-19. This particular virus is a coronavirus. Coronaviruses have been around for a very long time. We've all experienced them. We've had a cold or a flu. We've experienced a coronavirus in the past. This is a mutated version of a coronavirus. And it is a spherical virus that has protrusions on the outside. And those protrusions are important when it comes to us and our defense against the virus. Because those little protrusions, some people are calling them spikes, but when I see them under the microscope, they're not sharp and pointy. They're knob-shaped protrusions. Those protrusions are looking for places on our cells that they can attach to or dock. It's the same idea as the space shuttle docking to the space station. And when that docking occurs, that's when the infection becomes possible. Well, antiviral supplements, such as mushroom supplements that I'm going to identify here in just a moment, actually blunt those protrusions, or in some cases actually disable the proteins in those protrusions, so that while we may have the virus in our body, it's meaningless to our body. So some of these very potent antiviral mushrooms. There's a mushroom that's called agarikon. You don't hear it as frequently, but it is a very powerful medicinal mushroom, available in capsule form. You can buy it online. You can buy it at your health food store if you can get to a health food store. It has very strong antiviral properties. Turkey tail mushroom is both antiviral as well as antibacterial, as well as anti-inflammatory. And the same with the reishi. Reishi is very well known. It's probably one of the most commonly known mushroom supplements. So we have antiviral supplements. Traditional Chinese medicine, TCM is the way it's abbreviated, often incorporates these ideas into things like yin chow. Everyday yin chow is very powerful antiviral properties. We will probably all be exposed to the virus at some point. At this point, we had the opportunity to contain it. The containment window is passed. Now we're watching a virus sweep across the earth. We'll all at some point be exposed to it. The question is whether or not our immune system, if we've loved ourselves enough, this is where it comes down to, George, if we've loved ourselves enough to honor our bodies and to honor the gift of life in our bodies by living our lives in life-affirming ways. It comes right down to that. And rather than it being just a lifestyle choice, it is now becoming a lifestyle necessity for survival because we don't have any medicines right now to help us deal with this. But if you have a reasonably strong immune system, there's no reason to be afraid. And there's a good chance, what the statistics are now showing, George, it's so interesting. You know, the computer models based out of the UK, the Imperial College in London, were the models that were used to inform both the UK government and the United States government in terms of how to respond to this virus. Those models were looking at worst case scenarios because this is new, a lot of unknowns. They were updated only on Friday of this last week, on the, I don't have the calendar, 23rd or 24th, I believe was Friday of March. And what they're showing now, the original estimates, in the UK, for example, where they were looking over 500,000 deaths, they've now revised that to about 20,000 deaths, which is still a lot, but it is orders of magnitude different than 500,000 deaths. And one of the reasons, very interesting, is they now believe that this virus has been in the population longer than we have known. So many people are testing positive but never had the symptoms, that they had a natural immunity and that they were carriers for this. And it suggests that the herd, what's called the herd immunity, has already begun. And for those who are vulnerable in our population, who have underlying conditions, you need to take all the precautions, you know, that people are recommending. It is only those who are immune compromised that have any reason, I think, to be concerned about dying from the virus. But the problem, George, is a lot of people are immune compromised and they don't know it. So the World Health Organization, CDC, gave us some guidelines. Smokers are immune compromised. People with diabetes are typically immune compromised. People with hypertension, high blood pressure, obesity, overweight, those all contribute to being immune compromised, as well as people who have had cancer or are undergoing cancer treatments now. We all know that the chemotherapies, radiation therapies wreak havoc on the immune system. So there's no surprise there. So we just have to be honest with ourselves, George. You know, how can we solve a problem unless we're honest about the problem? So it's an invitation for every individual. If you hear that list and you say, I could do better on some of those. I could eat a little healthier. I could get a little bit better sleep, or maybe I need to do a little bit more physical exercise. Our bodies respond so quickly to positive impetus toward health. So it's not too late. And now that we are essentially, we're practicing social isolation or physical isolation, but not social isolation. A lot of us have more time to focus. Now is the time to get started. Movement is medicine. It can be as simple as walking in nature, which is really good for the immune system, or floor exercises, yoga, lifting weights, something to stimulate the immune system in the human body. And I think this is really, what it comes down to, George. We're all being asked to take better care of ourselves and to honor the gift of life that lives within each of us.
So let's, first of all, thank you, because in a very short period of time, you've done, as usual, a wonderful job of articulating where it comes from, what it is, and some of the things we can do about it. Yeah. You and I had a conversation the other day, and we were just talking about some of the changes that this pause has created in our lives. Yeah. And I know, for an example, in my own life, a few things have come up just over the last couple of weeks that I'm enormously grateful for. in addition to the reconnection with friends that I haven't made time to connect with for a while. I was wandering around in the middle of the night looking for something to read, and I stumbled on a bookcase that I haven't looked in a while. And there was a little philosophical library collection of Gabriel Khalil Gibran. And I know that you have spoken a lot about the prophet and its impact. What struck me as I started redevouring these books that I haven't read in years is what an extraordinarily passionate social activist he was, and the impact he had on life in the Middle East and life here as well, and then as a result of reading one passage, I realized that, as you know, I'm a sculptor, and I haven't been spending that much time in the last couple of years as we've been producing television and doing all of these things on my art, and that I haven't been honoring it. So I decided to put together a visual gallery of all of the work that I've created, just as a way of honoring it. So these kinds of things have come back into my life in a way that is really important. What about you? What are some of the things you're discovering in the pause, in this space?
Well, it's like you, George. I have spent a tremendous amount of my time traveling. For tax purposes, I have to tell the IRS when I'm home and when I'm not. And to my shock and amazement, I've never sat down. I know I traveled. I didn't know how much. I was home 28 days out of the year last year here in New Mexico, and this is my home. And the opportunity to be home has been the opportunity to take a breath, to catch up on projects, but to really reprioritize what's important. Where do I want to put my energy? We are blessed here to live in a state that is very sparsely populated. And our home is on, we say Santa Fe, but it's really on the outskirts of Santa Fe, a rural area. We are bordered by BLM land. So we literally walk out our back door, we cross our property line, we just keep walking for miles into, wilderness. And I've taken advantage of that with a daily hike pretty much every day, unless it's just pouring rain. And that's something I cherish. We haven't done a lot in the past. But I think what's really helpful, I'm going to back up about a half a step. Do we have time? Can I address another topic here, George?
Yes, please.
So I want to honor our time, but for me as a scientist, I look for meaning. I tend to look at the big picture. I'm a systems thinker. So I look at the big picture and then I leave the big picture and go into the nanosecond of my life to see where my life fits in that big picture. What I want to say to our viewers, anybody watching today, is that if you are, whatever you're feeling, it is perfectly natural for what we're experiencing. And I'd like to offer some structure to that. We, for the first time in my lifetime, are living a planet in grief. The entire planet is grieving right now. And they're not talking, on the mainstream media, George, they're telling us what to do and they're talking about logistics. Nobody's talking about us.
Yes.
Our emotions. We're more than viruses. We're more than immune systems. There's a very complex, a very fragile, a very mysterious and beautiful spirit within each of us that is not really being honored in the mainstream, and I wouldn't expect that it would. So what I'd like to say is we are in grief, and what we are grieving is the loss of a way of life. Some people know that, some don't, some acknowledge it, some don't. Some will agree with it and some may not, but it's true because we all are being prevented from doing what we have done only a matter of weeks ago. And when I think about grief, George, I can't think of a better person than Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to talk about grief, the 5 stages of grief. If our viewers, I'll just put this up, if you're not familiar, this is a little chart, the 5 stages of grief. And I'm just going to talk about this quickly because it gives a structure to what we're experiencing. It helps us to understand where we are in the process, to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And George, it lays the foundation for what you just asked me, because the honoring of our life's passions are part of the healing and the grief process. Mm-hmm. And if we can put a structure to that, for me, it helps tremendously, rather than just feeling like things are just happening for no reason. I don't know where I am. So I know for many of you, this is a review, and some have never heard of this. 5 stages of grief that Kubler-Ross identified. They're typically, people think about this in times of loss, in death. And while it works for death, it works for any loss, even the loss that we are experiencing now of a way of life. So the first stage is the stage of denial, where there's a lot of fear. And we all have seen that fear. People are emailing it. They're talking about it all over the world. There's confusion. There's shock. I've gone through that, and some people are still in that. Anger is a second stage. And with the anger comes anxiety. I'm hearing a lot of people that are anxious, aren't sleeping well, nervous, not used to being home without having the diversions of the world, frustration. And the third is depression, where we feel overwhelmed and helpless, and we just want to get away. And we're looking for ways to get away. Those 3 processes, I think, are simultaneously occurring right now, George, and especially in our community, and especially the depression. And they can all happen at the same time. You can be in denial and be depressed. So when we begin to move out of that depression is the bargaining stage, where we're struggling to find meaning. And I'm hoping, George, that by you and I having this conversation, and whoever we can help through this conversation, this gives a way to move into finding a meaning and reaching out to others, to the last stage, which is acceptance. And for me, the acceptance is the most exciting part, because in the acceptance, we begin to explore new options. We put a new plan in place, and we're ready to move forward. We're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it together. We're going to be better people, better families, stronger societies, better nations, a better planet. But here's the thing. The world that lies in front of us that has yet to emerge, we're creating right now by the way we respond to what life has just brought to our doorstep. And if we consciously are aware of that, then we can begin now living the principles of sustainability that are going to be the hallmark of this world that's about to emerge. When we go back to our lives, George, we can't go back to the old normal, because that world is gone. And what I'm not a prophet, but I see trends and cycles, and I can make some predictions. And I believe we're going to begin seeing a world where localized living is much more embraced in a much stronger way. Localized economies, localized sources of food, which we already do here in Santa Fe a lot with farm to table and things like that, but even to a greater degree, localized economies, localized finances. Because one thing this pandemic is teaching us is how fragile the supply lines are halfway around the world. If we can't get what we need for something like antibiotics, we know that that's got to change. 80% of the raw materials for antibiotics are coming from the other side of the planet, and those supply lines are down right now. So I think we're going to see this move toward localized living, which is precisely what we would want in a time of extremes, because it's not business as usual, because the world is changing. And I think it's a healthy way to live. I think we're going to see changes in social norms. A lot more is going to be happening online. Thank God for the technology and the internet. I'm going to make a prediction, George, right now. I will make a prediction. I predict a coronavirus baby boom around December of this year, because we've seen this in the past. We saw it 9/11. We've seen it in big crashes in the past. People are home together in an intimate setting. They're frightened. They're comforting one another, and human intimacy will lead to that baby boom. And I wouldn't be surprised to see what we are going to call coronavirus babies, is probably what they're going to call them, or something along those lines. So we are now laying the foundation for this new world. And if we can think that way, George, for me, it helps to move beyond being stuck in, and it's easy to get stuck. I mean, you can have coronavirus burnout from listening to all the announcements and all the YouTube videos, and all your friends are sending you links to click onto, and you just think, man, when is this going to end? Well, it is going to end, and I think it's going to end sooner than we have predicted, because our bodies have responded in ways that have not been acknowledged. And the mainstream medical community is taught not to trust our bodies. It's all about the medicines. So the medicines are coming for those that need them, and thank God. You know, if someone is immune compromised and they need a ventilator and they need that medicine to get them through, maybe that's the catalyst to help them look at their lives differently, begin supporting the natural systems within their bodies. And if you are living your life honoring the gift of your body, there's a good chance you're never going to need any of those things. And I don't think it's good to take them if you don't need it. So we live in a world where all things are possible for all people, because we all learn differently. And I think that's one of the blessings. Now I'm going to go back, George. Khalil Gibran, the prophet, was the name that he went under in the early 1920s. And his first book, he wrote many, but the foremost book was called The Prophet, where he talked about work in one of his chapters. And as a 10-year-old boy, I read that chapter, and it was a cornerstone, a hallmark in my life to this moment. To this moment, what Khalil Gibran said is, work is love made visible. Work is our love made visible. And I've applied that principle to every job. I used to load 50-pound bags of cat litter onto boxcars. And that was my love made visible, and I did a really good job. The reason I say that is because it takes work for us to think differently about our everyday lives, to think different about our routines and our nutrition, how we eat. That work is our love made visible. And the question I think we're asking is, are we worth the work that it takes to make those changes? I believe we are. And that's where my optimism comes from. So I just wanted to say that and get that all together, George, before we go any further with this.
Well, it's worth saying altogether. And another thing I think that this localization is beginning to demonstrate is the value and the importance of local decision making. We're seeing that there's a collective intelligence that can happen locally that can help make decisions that are more applicable for local environments than the nation as a whole. We're also seeing the folly of incompetence in leadership at a national level that can create havoc. So it's instructive to us in that regard. I also think that one of the things in Robert Bly's book, Iron John, I don't know whether you remember it, but one of the things that he talks about is that when something happens and we go down into the deep, into the unconscious, into the subconscious, to deal with some of the things that Kubler-Ross talks about in terms of grief, the tendency is to struggle back up to the surface as quickly as possible. And Bly's advice is that if we stay down long enough and deal with what we need to deal with, when we come back up to the surface, we're ready for the light and the brightness and the new direction. So one of the things that I'm personally hoping is that this lockdown goes on long enough, one, that it causes us a sufficient amount of pain to pay attention. The second thing that I'm hoping is that in the realizations that each one of us are happening, we don't then rush back up to the surface and try to recreate what, as you said, is no longer even a way of life. You know, I'd like to ask our viewers, and I'm going to start asking everyone, to contribute to kind of a new testament of life, in which we identify the things that we have discovered or rediscovered are so valuable and important, and then to look for ways in our lives that we can continue those practices. Because if we can do that individually, and if we can begin to do it collectively, I mean, look at what's happening. In places in China, the air is getting clearer because of the lockdown. And in harbors around the world, dolphins are swimming again. And we're beginning to see these touches of optimism and new hope beginning to emerge. And so that's really from what you've said, and I really honor always the way that you collectively put things together and make them meaningful for people, because right now that's really critical. But if we could form and create individual testaments to possibilities, the things we want to invest going forward, as you said, 28 days is not enough to be at home in a life in which you have such rich variety of activities. So I just, we can talk more, and I'd like to hear any closing thoughts from you. But
George, well, thank you, and yes to everything you just said. And it's interesting. Right before this happened, I remember saying to Martha, I wish I had a little bit more time off. There's so many things I'd like to do. And what she said the other day was, careful what you wish for, You've got more time off than you'd even imagine. Where I see people struggling is, and this is, as you can imagine, when I say we, my office is it's a global office. We've got people in London. We've got people all over the US. We're getting inundated with messages of people asking when things are going to get back to normal, how to get things back to normal. And what that tells me, there's something called normalcy bias, George.
Yes.
And it's a psychological term. Some of our viewers I know are very familiar with it, where we tend to discount a shock by trying to live as if that shock in life has not happened, in the presence of a world that will not support that way of life. And this, I think, is what I'm seeing. People have a mental idea of what their lives were like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And this is happening very quickly. I mean, this is a tremendously accelerated change that we're seeing in society and on our planet. But if we cling to that image of what was our normal a month ago, this is where the struggle comes in. This is where the suffering begins. That way of life worked for us at that point in time under those circumstances and conditions of the world, and it got us where we are today. Those things have to change because the conditions that supported them no longer exist. So if we can be present with ourselves now and take this time to become the strongest that we can be emotionally, psychologically, physically, in our relationships, and begin to take all of the building blocks that lie before us right now and construct a healthy, sustainable way of living our everyday lives as individuals. And for me, on a personal level, that means less time on airplanes, less time away from my feet on the earth of the high desert of northern New Mexico. And that is going to be central to me as we move forward. So if in prioritizing what I believe, I'm on this earth for a long time, but the truth is we never know. And it is an opportunity for me to say, of all the things for me to put my energy into, for whatever time I have on this planet, what is that's important to me? And being able to say no to the things that are often very good things. They're just not my things. A lot of people are asking me to support their vision, and I'm saying, that's your passion. It's not my passion.
Yes.
So these kinds of things, and as we put these building blocks together, then we move forward. I have one last thing I want to share. As a scientist, people are asking, Greg, how long is this going to last? I don't know the answer to that. But as a scientist, I ask myself the same question. I did some research, and it's research you're not seeing in the mainstream. I didn't know we were going to do this, so I'm just going to hold these up. I know you can't read the writing, but what I want you to see are the patterns. These are epidemics from the 20th century that have swept across our nation and the world. And what you can see is they all follow a pattern. And for the most part, the big dark circle is when the epidemic peaks. So you see that here, 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 and there. The one exception is right here. So what these are: smallpox, rubella, mumps, hepatitis A, and pertussis. Hepatitis A has it works a little bit differently. What the good news and why I'm sharing this is because all of these viral infections, all but pertussis, are viral infections. Viral infections tend to have a season, and the season is between March, April, and May. And beginning June, July, and August, they taper out to end of the year. We're dealing with a viral infection. We don't know if COVID-19 is going to follow this. We have no reason to believe it will not. And we're already seeing signs that as the humidity increases, temperatures increase in parts of the world, the cases they're going way down. So this isn't necessarily something, it's not going to be with us forever. It's a window of time where it's going to take a season for our bodies to learn what to do with this virus. And if we give ourselves what we need, all the things we talked about, our bodies know how to do that really well. So to me, that's encouraging because it means we're right in the window of when viral infections typically happen, and we're on the other side of that March, April, May timeframe. Right in that window is when we can expect to see the decrease, and it usually happens pretty quickly.
So we've covered some good ground today. For those of you who haven't started watching the Ageless Living series, I invite you to do so, and certainly look for Gregg's program. It's in 2 episodes, and it's called A New Human Story. You'll enjoy more of the depth and the joy that he brings, and the depth of consequence and information. Gregg, it's great to see you for this brief period at home. I want to thank you for taking the time. It's the kind of generosity of spirit that I spoke to early on. You're always someone who steps forward to communicate things that can help other human beings, and I bless you for that.
Well, George, thank you for the opportunity. And like I said, a lot of our community doesn't watch TV. They aren't plugged into the mainstream, and they need your voice and the voice that you and Sedina bring to our community. So I want to thank you for thinking of me and for the opportunity for me to share today. And hopefully it's not our last. I look forward to our next. And take good care in the time that you have to focus on your art and the things that bring joy to your soul.
I will, and thank you very much. Blessings.